It's a new year, which means it's time to discuss social media trends for 2025.
In total, we've got 6 trends that we're keeping our eyes on, and we think you should as well.
The first trend in particular, I promise, it's a big one that you surely do not have on your radar.
Let's dive in.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Road Church Tool Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host. It's Pastor Pearl Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
And today, we are kicking off the new year talking about social media trends for 2025. Biggest communication shift in 501 years. Probably getting close to 600 years at this point. Yeah. Okay, Pastor, take us away with trend number 1.
Well, trend number 1 is actually the anti-trend.
The anti-trend. So I think we have all felt the sensation on social of, hey, everything's changing so quickly and I cannot possibly keep up. And I wanted to start this year by putting everyone a little bit at ease and basically just lay out the facts of the current social landscape. We have not seen a dramatic macro trend shift since 2018, 2019, 2020, depending on where you want to pinpoint the disruption that was TikTok and how that, in a great sense, influenced every social platform and the entire social media landscape. What this means is, if there's no great macro trend that's changing, you as a church should feel perfectly comfortable not making any dramatic changes to your social media strategy. Now, that being said, there are micro changes that happen all the time.
Sure.
Those micro changes affect design aesthetics. They might affect like a certain way of doing a post. For example, there was a while where sermon clips, we recommended churches always use kind of that AI voice that would like kick off the hook because that was really popular. And that micro trend has dissipated in the last 12 to 24 months. So that would be like a small change that you might want to make. But we're not coming into 2025 looking at our sermon clips and thinking, is it time to reevaluate?
So what I hear you saying is, coming into the year of our Lord, 2025, everyone can just take a deep breath and relax and not feel this like pressure or, to its nth existential dread that like there's something that you're not doing that you need to be doing, something new, something changing. It's like, no, like we have settled in here. And for you to say that it's been since 2018, 2019, 2020, maybe at the latest, is kind of like a little disorienting because it feels like things move so quickly. But if you just take a moment to actually do some sober assessment, it's like, well, since TikTok and that major disruption that TikTok brought with short form video, our strategies haven't really changed that much. They haven't had to because, like you're saying, on a macro level, short form video is kind of sticking around on all 4 major platforms, and the strategies that we've been talking about for years, is specifically when it comes to sermon content, they're still relevant. So sure, you may have a few tweaks to do here and there, but going into this year, you can just relax. There's not too much changing, and you're gonna be all right.
And you can turn the pod off. No. We've still got 5 more to go through.
We do have some trends.
They're just not going to be so disruptive that you have to change everything.
Praise God. We want to get to the next one?
Yeah.
The one that's actually a trend and not an anti-trend? Okay, this one's called the Period of Stagnation.
Yeah, it's still kind of an anti-trend because it's an extension of the first one. So if we have this current landscape where nothing is changing this year, but also nothing has dramatically changed in 4, 5, 6 years. At this point, we're in a period of stagnation. I got a lot of DMs last year from churches that asked the question like, are sermon clips still performing as they once were? And it's not a super easy to answer question because on the one hand, no, sermon clips are not performing as well as they once did. Yes, they're still the best social media post for churches. What that means is every time there's a massive disruptive trend, and earlier in social, they were happening a lot quicker. And that's true of any industry. The more it matures, the less you have dramatic changes.
Yes.
If you think about the most stagnant industries, you might think education, government, healthcare, places where they have not had many changes because things have been around for so long. We were at dinner last night. We were talking about our local healthcare system, of which your wife works within, of which I spent some intimate time during my little knee surgery. And our local hospital, series of hospitals, have introduced some new tech. And it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to any of the hospitals.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're like, this is how we do things in
Yes.
this hospital.
Yeah.
And you don't want to change things. So as social has matured, these changes have become less frequent. But when you have this period of stagnation, saturation increases. Saturation occurs. And so what that means is if you weren't a first mover when that big last dramatic change did happen, you might not be able to reap as much of the benefits.
Sure.
If you were an early mover, you might notice, man, I'm doing the same things. I think I'm doing them just as well, if not better, because I've been at it for longer, but they're not quite returning the same, outcomes as they once were. That's a perfectly natural part of the cycle, right? Because at the beginning of a big macro change, there's a lot of opportunity,
Yes.
but without certainty. And what happens is the more certainty increases, the less opportunity
Yep.
increases. It's kind of like this slider where as one goes up, the other goes down. And so when the opportunity is at its highest, that's when like certainty is at its lowest, right? We saw Bitcoin cross 100,000 USD, which was like this really big momentous occasion. And people were like, man, if only I had invested, $1,000 of Bitcoin in 2011. It's like, well, certainty at that point was so low
Yes.
that the thought of investing $1,000 probably would have been considered insane by 99.99% of the population. Whereas now it's like, oh man, if only, but that's not how things work.
Yeah.
And the same is true with social. So you have a period of stagnation because of saturation. Yes, sermon clips are still the best thing. And then what's gonna happen? You get restlessness. You get not individual restlessness where you and I are like, man, this is tough.
Yeah.
But like someone comes in with a new idea, and this always happens, and because there's collective restlessness, because like there isn't like enough opportunity, that new idea, that new opportunity exists, and then enough people start to go to it. Those new opportunities aren't rushed to in the same way if there's like existing opportunity. That new opportunity, that new potential can only come out of a period of stagnation.
So we've talked about how, the last kind of macro shift was 2018, 2019, 2020. We're talking 4, 5, 6 years ago. At what point do you think we kind of reached stagnation? And now I'm asking you to be a prophet. Like, what do you think comes next? Like, how do we exit a period of like collective social media stagnation if everyone's kind of just doing the same thing? And frankly, like no one has truly innovated in quite some time.
Yeah, so let's think about some of the disruption that's happened in other industries in the past like decade or so. Airbnb was a concept that massively disrupted the hotel industry. Could you have predicted Airbnb? No.
Right.
Because if you just define Airbnb as what it is in a world of hotels, it sounds a bit insane. It's like I could go to a hotel or I could rent a room at Alex's house.
Right.
Well, what if I murder Alex? Okay, bad idea. We're not going to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Uber, the same thing, right? Like it disrupted an entire industry of like taxi driving, I guess. And you couldn't have predicted it then. But I guess now we just, like, that's the world we live in. And I guess it's impossible to see like what could be on the horizon next. Do you think industries like reach a point of stagnation where like innovation becomes not impossible, but like improbable?
It becomes infrequent.
Yeah.
So if you think about healthcare, unless there's a major breakthrough in the science, usually things remain the same. And we were talking last night at dinner about my knee surgery. So I have a knee arthroscopy, a knee scope, and I have these 3 little incisions on my right kneecap. So in the 3 incisions, they put a camera in one incision to see what the surgeon was doing. They put an irrigation instrument in the other incision.
A little drain.
I don't know if it was a drain or if it was like making things more wet because there was a lot of squelching.
Putting in fluid or taking out, we'll never know.
Yeah, like when you do like if you're doing like concrete cutting, like with a concrete
like a
saw,
wet
there has
saw,
to be like
Yeah.
the water. That's what I think it was.
Oh,
This just was a bone saw.
An input hose, not an output hose.
Perhaps, who knows? I just know that like the first 72 hours after the surgery, I'm walking around and it's like I'm sounding like the Stranger Things monster in my knee. It's
I
like,
don't like that.
a lot of squelching.
Thank God that's over.
Yeah, praise God. But that was like, knee arthroscopy is like, I don't know, is it 100 years old? I don't think so.
Right.
So like before that happened, it was like open knee surgery or like good luck.
Before that,
your knee
certain
hurts.
death. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like when technological breakthrough happens, that leads way for innovation. So surely there are some things that we can see on the horizon, like hardware. So glasses tech or like AR,
Sure.
whatever it might be. That doesn't feel immediate in terms of like mass acceptance. Like we saw what Apple did with their eyewear. Like Apple usually comes out with something and we're like, it's time to accept this. And we didn't. So like even Apple put forth their best option and we were like, yeah, it's still not, we're not there yet. So that doesn't feel like it's immediate. Other things can happen, like healthcare. What else is disrupting healthcare right now? The ability to meet with doctors remotely. So like instead of going into the ER, I can connect to a doctor online and they can prescribe me something without having to see me in person for certain things. Okay, that's disruptive. That's a new model. And so what basically happens is things become more infrequent. I also don't like to be the prophet where I say like, this is what's coming because usually there's enough opportunity that exists right now. And I want to be very clear, despite, let's say, sermon clips not being as successful all the time, they're still your best option and they still succeed all the time.
Yeah.
Just not like as much. It's like, like pitchers are throwing harder now. Don't stop swinging.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like maybe like, you know, in basketball, like the defenses are not as strong because people are shooting so many 3-pointers. It's like, you still got to play defense. Like that's how things go.
Yeah.
And then you just ride the wave for what it is. Now, what could be something on the horizon that triggers a break and something new? That's trend number 3.
Yeah, I mean, we've alluded to how TikTok has disrupted our social media habits all the way back in 2018, 2019. And what could be on the horizon, I mean, as of this recording, we're not quite sure, but trend number 3 is the looming TikTok ban in the United States of America.
At the time of this recording, the TikTok ban in the States is set to come into effect January 19th, 2025.
Like it's happening.
Right. or is it? Because the Supreme Court did announce that it will review TikTok's challenge against the ban. TikTok has requested an injunction to give time for a more thorough review of the ban bill before they go through with it. Basically, they're like, hey, if we're going to do something massive like this, let's actually like really review it because this is going to affect many businesses and many people. How many people? Well, TikTok came out
half the population
in 2023, and they were like 150 million Americans on here, almost half of the population.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. The other twist in this, and this is all subject to change. I'm not a lawyer. If I read those things, you're like, well, technically an injunction means I apologize.
Right? Not a prophet, not a lawyer.
Not a doctor.
Okay. Not a doctor.
So the other twist in this is that recently, returning President Trump has showed a little bit of affection and love for TikTok. Some people asked him, hey, are you going to like push this ban through? Maybe not. And he's like, let me tell you, TikTok is fun.
Yeah.
And he spoke very positive of it because a lot of the interviews that he did, whether it was Theo Vaughn or Rogan, were disseminated in very big ways on platforms like TikTok.
Earned him a lot of votes.
In the form of podcast clips. Did those podcast clips perform as well as they would have in 2019, 2020? Maybe not, but they're still the best option even for returning presidents.
Yes.
And he was like, you know, that helped us really make inroads with younger voters. He's like, so I have a soft spot for TikTok. I really do.
See.
So what I want to talk about is the fallout of what a TikTok ban might mean. This would not be the first time that one of our precious apps, specifically video apps, was taken from us. RIP Vine. MySpace is kind of similar, although that was kind of like we all voted with our attention and said we choose Facebook rather than...
We let it die.
Yeah. So this would be the first time that like, let's say either the purchase of the platform being shut down by its owners or kind of just the free market decision making plays a role in this. This is mostly just like the government saying, hey, this is not in the best interests of us as a sovereign nation. TikTok has to do A, B, or C. You're not willing to do that, TikTok? Okay, see you later. If and when the ban goes through, what it's going to kick off is social media migration.
Of potentially just shy of 200 million users.
Right. The only difference is that the vast majority of those 200 million users in this case have multiple passports already.
Right.
They don't only live in the TikTok ecosystem, though they might like reside there, 10 months of the year, if we're using that analogy.
Yeah.
That will have effects on other platforms. We see this in the terms of real migration, right? Like people from other cultures come to countries of different cultures, and then it's like, how do we figure out this melting pot? Are you supposed to become like us? Are you also introducing us to new things? What kind of blend is it of both? And that's not always a smooth transition. And so if you have a ton of people from TikTok, which has distinct user behaviors as a social platform, And those people come to Instagram and they're like, hey, this seems like the closest. All right, we're going to spend our time on Instagram.
Yeah.
You won't see those things immediately. But what might that mean for Instagram 12 months, 24 months, 36 months away? Again, you as a person serving in a church do not need to make any changes based on speculation of how social media migration that may or may not happen and what degree it will affect social. You don't need to forecast any of those things. The reason we talk about this is to just kind of be aware of what's happening so that when in 14 months I say, there's a new type of social media post and it's this, and you're like, what? You understand a little bit of the precursor that brought us to this point. But we're not changing any of our approaches to social right now. We didn't have such a big influence on TikTok that we had to say, follow us on Instagram or else you'll never see us again. And so you just want to be aware of kind of like what's happening, but stay the course with what you're doing. Don't be discouraged and don't feel like you need to be disruptive to your existing strategy and make a big sweeping change.
I mean, it's also part of why we've advocated over the years to be posting your short form video content across all 4 major platforms if you're comfortable: YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, and TikTok. So if TikTok gets swept out from under your feet, like hopefully you have a presence already on those other platforms. You're posting similar, if not the same content, and folks will migrate as they do. Moving on. 4th social media trend for 2025, social for search.
Yes, social for search. So one of the great values of social is discovery, right? We talk about the discovery era. This is introducing your church to new audiences. I wanted to highlight some of the other values of being active on social that have nothing to do with introducing your church to new audiences. We would call that outbound marketing, where it's like, hey, we're publishing stuff with the intent to introduce our church to new people. So this is not a publishing trend, nor is it a platform trend on social. This is a user behavior trend. And here's what I mean. Previously, when you are evaluating a church, when you're evaluating a restaurant, when you're evaluating a business or an organization of any kind, what you would do is you would visit their website, right? And if you're evaluating a church, you would like stay entirely on their website. You'd go through the homepage, you look at their about page, you would see their leadership, you would want to figure out service times. Now, what we're seeing with user behavior is, yes, you go to a church's website, but you very quickly click the social icons in the footer to check out their Instagram.
I've heard from folks go to church, go through Google to a church's website, immediately scroll to the footer.
Yes.
They go through, they're using the website as a proxy to get to Instagram.
Yes.
To check out
exactly.
the church.
You like bypass the website entirely, basically. Why? Well, because social media does promise to have more up-to-date information than a website.
And for a lot of church websites, more photos of real people, you know?
Yes.
Like most church websites that we're encountering are really lacking in that department of having a real photo, smiling people from your real church. They're either out-of-date photos or in some unfortunate circumstances, stock photos. And folks resonate with, and they connect with real photos of real people. And they know that like, if I'm most likely to find this on Instagram if I'm going to find it anywhere. So people are going there to see what your church looks like, to see what the complexion of your congregation, what it's made up of, what your sanctuary looks like, what your kids' room looks like. That's what folks are looking for when they're exploring, local churches near me.
I was talking with a church this past week, and they had just begun working with us at Social Sermons. I was checking out their website. We were doing our intro call, and their website was really nicely done. This was a smaller church, 50 to 100 people. And they had really nice photos on their website. And I could tell instantly, okay, so this is kind of where you meet. This is the feel for the demographics of the congregation. And we were talking about this specific benefit because I said, despite that, and you've done everything right here, there's no real way for me in a few seconds to get a feel for your theology, maybe your communication style, the vibe of your pastor, the one that's going to be on stage for the majority of the service time that I'm there.
Yeah.
I can gain that though from social.
Totally.
Because this church was asking me like, are we going to like introduce our church to thousands of people? And I said, hopefully. Like, these are the
plan,
aggregate numbers of the churches that we've worked with for the past 12 months, all 150 plus. And it's like, 38 times more engagement, 30 something times more impressions, followers grow 50% faster. But I said, let's also talk about the other benefits of social. Because it's so multi-beneficial that no effort is ever wasted, which is exciting. So I said, imagine this. I go to your website, like me, right now, and I see that. And then I go to your socials. And all you have right now are like pictures of events, like graphics of like, come to our potluck, whatever it is.
Classic.
I was like, I'm not going to go to your YouTube and watch through a 60-minute service. But what I would love to do in 30 to 90 seconds is click on a sermon clip with a compelling hook and just like get a feel. Like I don't need to go through a full sermon. I'm planning on attending your church, but I just want to like get a feel for that.
Yeah.
That's social for search. And I don't know if this is on the radar of as many churches as I think it should be. And this trend is not, let's say, new for 2025, but like it is fully cemented at this point. The user behavior has changed. And this is a really important part of assessing trends in a given year or assessing just like the general shifts. Because yes, platforms introduce new features and design aesthetics change. But what's also true is that the way we use social as consumers changes.
Yeah.
And that all often is like the precursor to the aesthetic change or to the feature change as a response to the culture that's changing, not the other way around. And so if we can understand first how the culture might be changing, then we can respond to it in a better way. And so if we're in a period of stagnation and saturation, and for whatever reason you look at your social media metrics and you're like, man, a couple years ago, things were moving a bit quicker. Or I feel like I'm doing everything right and things aren't moving exactly how I'd like. Just also remember the role that social plays in overall evaluation of your church and what we would call inbound marketing, where you're not reaching out to people. People are reaching out to you.
Yes.
And social now plays a critical role in that. Is it more critical than your website? For some, yes.
Yeah.
For everyone, not quite. But for more and more people, it's playing an equal important role, sometimes even more important.
I'm eager to see, specifically on Instagram, the search kind of evolve into a place where if I'm in a new city, I can search in Instagram coffee shops near me, and I'm going to get similar results that I would get in Google. Because when I'm searching that in Google, I am using those websites as a proxy to get to Instagram. Like that's how, and so I would love to see the evolution of Instagram search so that when folks are visiting, they're on vacation in your city and they can search churches near me on Saturday night, your church is going to show up there if you've done your due diligence with your SEO and maybe your Instagram description or whatever, however, wherever, the interwebs are pulling that information from, that it's going to serve your church as a local result. I'm eager to see that evolution. I'm hopeful we get there because I think that would make Instagram a much more useful tool to me rather than just kind of like, and a source of entertainment.
You are describing exactly what I said, where the culture has shifted, where we're not using search in the same way, but Instagram has not yet responded to provide us the features. We're kind of like hacking our way through it at this point. There's a reason why we at Pro Church Tools used to be heavy into blogging in 2014 and through 2018, because that was when you would publish content, it would be discovered because people were searching that.
Yes.
Nowadays on Instagram, that's where people are searching. So we basically like blog full time on Instagram via our carousels and our reels. And not only do people search for that information and then find it, but we also can introduce that content to people via the algorithm. So like inbound and outbound is happening on the same platform at the same time, which is also taking the place of search in a lot of ways. And with AI, I mean, are people happy with the Google Gemini search result summaries at the top of their search now?
It's so bad.
Right. So not only has culture kind of decided, hey, we actually like getting search in a number of different ways, the responses that Google has made so far have not been met with, rousing applause. And so what that also means is people are losing trust in search engines. And so what might that mean for the next 12 to 36 months?
I mean, I know I want to get on to the next one, but the picture you just painted about the progression of this business is the perfect illustration for this. You built this business off of blog posts that were getting that were indexed for search on Google. So that was like the first era of this company.
2011.
And the last 6-8 years, the growth of our company has been on the back of your Instagram growth, which has been indexed for algorithmic, not as much active search, but like algorithmic performance. It's two totally different eras, providing similar content, but just like in different ways, in different places.
Identical writing. It's me sitting down in front of a blank cursor and just writing.
You're writing to the same person.
Same person.
About the same stuff. They're coming to the content in a totally different way.
I was on a call with another creative church business entrepreneur yesterday. He said to me, like we're in like the same space, so closely aligned that on the call like 5 times he said like, there's only 8 of us out there. And I was like, yeah, that's probably true. He said, yeah, I discovered you in the last couple years via Instagram Reels. And I was like, it kind of caught me by surprise. So I was like, he's like, how long have you been in business? I've been like 10 years. Like, and then 2 years before that, before we incorporated as like an actual technical business. He's like, really? How did I never hear about you? And I was like, I don't know.
Right. Like 800 podcast episodes, 600 YouTube videos or whatever it is now. Like,
but it just goes to show you, like it's funny because we'll have conversations with people being like, yeah, I've been following forever. Like, everyone knows you. And then like multiple times a year, it's like, I just discovered you. And it's like, yeah, because like, that's how it goes. Like there's just always more people to reach.
Yeah. There's so much on the table here for churches online.
No efforts wasted on social.
Okay. The next one. The fifth social media trend, using social for market research.
Okay. So same type of church that I was meeting with, but a different church also this week.
Okay. You're a busy man.
Well, we had, our big kind of like open enrollment period for social sermons. And then I had a multi-week international travel stint. And then I had knee surgery. And so my availability for intro calls was limited. And we had all these churches enroll. So all those spots were taken up. And then I was away for a few weeks. And so we've had like a dozen churches. I've just been waiting patiently. Yeah. And then I meet with them and they're like, finally. So I was talking with this one church and they were in a similar place, smaller church, 50 to 100 people, and we were talking about the other benefits of social. And I was like, yes, we want to introduce your church to tons of people. We want to allow social to exist for search. So it's outbound and it's inbound. And I said, and there's a third benefit to this. Most of the messaging that your church creates is only ever experienced by your internal audience.
Right.
So I'm speaking to the lead pastor here. So what I mean by that is like, you create this sermon and you create it for your people. And you're like, you know what? This is the message from the wisdom of Scripture that intersects with the needs of my community right now and what I feel like God is speaking to us. And I say, what's also true, though, is that the wisdom of Scripture is for all time, for all people. And your church is uniquely positioned to meet the needs of people in your community that have not yet crossed paths with you. That Venn diagram might not also be a perfect overlap. What I mean is, what's great about social is that you publish things to the world. And when you have a viral for me post, which is rare, we always say 3 to 5% of the content, we want to hit that viral for me qualifier, which is 10x the reach of a typical post. When you hit that mark, you are getting valuable insight into the unique voice of your church and how it intersects with the greater needs of the world. People are voting with their attention, voting with their time, voting with their interest and saying, you know what, you're saying something here that's very compelling. And when you're consistent on social, and you publish, no weeks off, for months and months and years, you don't have one viral for me post, you start to stack them. Those are introducing your church to new people. That's amazing. They can become the pinned posts so that when people visit your search, they visit your social profile via search, they're looking at, oh, these ones have a ton of views. Let me click on those ones. So now it's working for inbound and outbound, and they're valuable data points because now you have 3, 6, 9, 12 different posts where you're like, there's something here because now I can identify a trend. There was one church, literally called One Church in Texas, and there was a husband and wife preaching combo, and they noticed that when they would publish sermon content related to parenting, it would outperform all the others. And because they were a husband and wife preaching couple, and because they were in their like 30s, 40s, and they had kids, it's not like they were preaching parenting series every single week, but like it comes up, right? Your son, you're a dad, you talk about like the experiences with your parents and with your kids. And so then they were like, okay, let's just like keep clipping the parenting stuff because that seems to do well. And what they quickly realized was like that was the intersection in their community that like was really hitting a sweet spot. You only gain that data and that insight by publishing to the world and seeing how people respond. And that's distinctly different from publishing to your existing congregation. And like, how else would you get that quote unquote market research? Like I called this social for market research, which sounds like very corporate, and I couldn't really think of a better term. Surely there is one. But the idea there being that like you can get people to tell you with their time and attention, because people will not actually ever tell you, right? Like there's a 1 in 1,000 people that will say, yeah, pastor, sermon kind of sucked. So, oh, great sermon, pastor, great sermon, pastor. But what if I could say you could actually get people's real, unbiased, unfiltered feedback at scale, and that could inform not just the messages that you do in the future, let's say, but the programming and the pastoral care and how you disciple, because you know with certainty that this is the perfect intersection of faith and culture and how your church is uniquely positioned to serve the needs of others.
That's so good. It is kind of like a tertiary trend. It's not the main point of posting to social, but what you're saying is so true. This feedback that you're going to get is inevitably going to be so valuable to the voice behind what you choose to preach about. And then take it a step further, you know, for this one church, that they could receive this feedback by how people are voting on these posts with their likes, or their comments, or their shares. It's like, okay, there's a grace on us, or on this message from us, and who knows? Maybe they create a parenting course. They do a series on YouTube for parenting, because they are identifying by the feedback on these posts that they wouldn't have otherwise received, that like there's something to what they're talking about, and they would have not otherwise known this without posting to social. And like you said, putting it on the world stage and saying like, okay, how is this received by folks who don't belong to our community? So yes, such great value in that. But it does require taking no weeks off, right? Like you have to be consistent with what you're posting.
And that's the other reason why consistency is important. And you said, you know, this is not like the primary reason you post on social, it's tertiary. And in the short term, yes, but like in the long term,
yes,
it might be the greatest benefit. Because when I first started publishing content, like the first blog post I ever wrote was the 3 best songs off of Hillsong's Cornerstone album. Because I was like,
what do I write about?
That matters to me. Yeah. Is that what people care about? And then I remember in the first year I wrote a post like, the best 64 free fonts for churches. And that was the first post that performed really well. And I was like, oh, people want to hear about fonts? I was equally proud of all the last 10 things I wrote. I thought they were all great, but this is the one that you all want to hear about? Great. Every year, we're going to do a font thing. And that eventually led me to go, okay, people want like easy, free design resources. Okay, let's do something that's like that underlying motivation, but expressed in a different way.
That's
which led
church
to
websites.
Our very first product, the Church Graphic Design Handbook. And so like it was all getting real people's feedback. And then eventually you get to the point where when you're talking with someone, you are aware of their objections to your ideas, and you begin calling out those objections before they even say them, which then builds so much confidence in you from them, because they're like, wow, not only did he like put forward his ideas, but then like he already had like rebuked all the objections that I had in my head. Wow, he must have really thought this through. And that's the same for pastoral care. People are like, is this God thing really gonna work? Is this Jesus thing really gonna work? Like when you've heard the pushback from comments.
Yes.
And so you say from stage something like, this is what the Bible says about like the role of husband and wife. And I know what you might be thinking. And then you literally say the objections that people have because you've heard them on Facebook already.
Yeah.
The people sitting there and the people that you respond to in the comments where you respond in the same way, like, okay, well, you know, this idea I was a little skeptical of at first, but now that you've explained it that way, my objection, I'm not really confident in objecting anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe I will try this. Yeah. And the Christian worldview and the upside down kingdom, all these things that go counterculture to the way that most people have accepted, they're going to live their life, become that much more pliable. Let's get to
last one from the top rope, the one that nobody saw coming. What about AI memes?
Okay, this is one of the only notable trends from a design sense that I've seen begin to take shape. So the way I keep seeing it is in the form of sports, basically.
Okay.
Now AI generation has become good enough where you can say like, take this famous person and put them in this situation, and you can create a rendering that looks almost like a photo. So there was a recent injury in the NFL, and it was a running back. And this running back had an issue with their meniscus, and they thought they were going to be out for the season. So they went to see one doctor, and they're like, yeah, you're out for the season. And then they went to see a second doctor, and they said, you're out for the season. And then reports came out that this running back was going to go see a third doctor. And then fans of the team said, this is the third doctor. And it was a picture of their coach dressed up in a doctor's outfit. The idea being like the coach was like, yeah, man, I can clear you. You're good to go. And it was like, it looked like a perfect photo of this coach dressed up as a doctor. Anytime a basketball player plays poorly, people will take to ChatGPT or whatever AI tool that they're using and say, okay, dress up this NBA player in a fast food outfit. The idea being like, if they weren't employed by this team, they would be working at fast food because that's how bad they are. Put the fries in the bag, bro. So this is happening a lot. I think that there are certainly applications for your church where you have your pastor dressed up in certain outfits. It's, of course, incredibly niche, which is why we saved it for last and why we do not intend to spend too much time on it.
So you're saying we're not going to do a full episode on this later on in the year?
I'm not saying that. That does seem on the table, but at least not the first episode of the year.
Noted.
We're grateful that you did stick around with us for the very first episode. We will be back next Wednesday. Thank you for your time, attention, and trust. 30 minutes Quick and easy, quick and easy. I've often said that. I always say that. I'm going to put you on Do Not Disturb. Don't even think about disturbing me, lest I be disturbed. Amen.